You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian, here with my co-host Matt. Back with you again after a couple weeks layoff. I am completely sorry about that. I got a new computer in and then ended up having some internet issues, so it stopped us from being able to record. But we are back now. Feels kind of weird after having a little 2-week layoff. Not doing this for 2 weeks after we've been doing it for 5 to 6 months every week. It feels kind of awkward, but I don't know how you feel about that, Matt.
Yeah, it does feel kind of weird. Luckily enough, we didn't have too much news that we missed. So the good news is that we can bring it all to you this week, and everything will be good. So doing pretty excited for it.
Yeah, I'm excited too. We're, like we said, spring training has started. We got our last couple major free agents have signed. We also started the injury bug during spring training. And then going to bring you the kind of the good and the bad of who's looked good and who's looked bad. Spring training, you really can't read too much into it. But what are we, a week and a half, 2 weeks in now? It's you can look in a little bit and see, hey, this guy's maybe struggling, this guy's looking good. More on, not what the results are, but what, his velocity and what's going on around him altogether. But
Yeah, and pretty soon too. So far we haven't really had that much. Everyone's kind of getting warmed up, but in the next week or two, we'll start to see guys who are kind of borderline on making teams. I think that's kind of the big part of spring training that happens where the results do matter to a certain level, and we'll start to see that in the next week or two as well.
absolutely. Well, let's jump into the last signings that we've had. And let's go ahead and start with Jackie Bradley Jr., former Boston Red Sox center fielder, signed a deal with the Milwaukee Brewers for 2 years, $24 million, that has an opt-out after this first season.
Yeah, Jackie Bradley Jr. is a really good defensive player. He's had a couple of years where he was good with the bat as well, but the defense is really what drives his value. 2-year, $24 million deal. He does have an opt-out after that first year, so it could be a 1-year deal. I think the opt-out was $13 million if he walked away, so it could be a 1-year, $9 million deal if he has a big year. His career, only a 239 hitter, but a 321 on base, good walk rate. 412 slugging percentage. He's run a pretty low batting average on balls in play for a lot of his career. But this past year, that number went up some, and he actually had a 120 WRC plus this past year. Was really good at the plate, and put up what would have been one of his better seasons if it was a 162 game season. 2016 though, by far his best season, put up over 5 wins above replacement. Was truly a star caliber player that year. If the bat does well, this guy could be an all-star, and if the bat's pretty average, he's still a useful player because he plays a really nice center field, but works out great for Milwaukee because Lorenzo Cain isn't quite what he once was, and maybe you could throw him over in left field or something to help maybe mitigate some of the issues that might be there at this point. He doesn't quite have the range he had. His arm's not quite as good, even though he does still have really good range. That would be a nice thing to do. And Jackie Bradley Jr., of course, being the defensive player he is spectacular. So
Yeah, it could be a really big upgrade in that center field spot, like you were saying, with Kane not being quite what he was. It's interesting because they did have Avisail Garcia already, so maybe he splits some time with Kane in left field, or it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out because I don't see Jackie Bradley Jr. being a platoon bat for them at all. So. But we'll go ahead and move on to our next signing that we had, and that's Jake Odorizzi, former Tampa Bay Rays and we just got talked about the Brewers, former Minnesota Twin, signed a 2-year, $23.5 million deal with a player option for 2023 with the Houston Astros.
Yeah, Jake Odorizzi's a good player too, good pitcher. He's got a career 3.92 ERA. The FIP and xFIP, his peripherals just a little bit higher than that, but pretty solid mid rotation starter. 2019 he was really good. Had a 3.36 fielding independent pitching and a 3.51 ERA. Put up over 4 wins above replacement. Was legitimately a all star caliber pitcher. in 2019, and 2020 he only pitched I think like 12 or 13 innings. I think he dealt with a little bit of injury bug in 2020, but with it being a short season, wouldn't put too much stock into it. And the Astros getting him, if they get him at this 2019 for him for 2 years, $23 million, that's a pretty dang good decision. Of course, it's pretty low risk being, just a 2 year deal if they don't get that for him. If they get just the mid rotation guy, it's probably market value. So I like this deal for the Astros and for Odorizzi. I mean, he's getting paid a pretty good bit of money, and that's nice, over 10 million a year after a kind of injury season, and then with this being the COVID year, teams aren't paying quite as much for the most part as they were. This is a pretty nice deal for both sides. I like it.
Yeah, I think it's a nice fallback for Odorizzi. He probably should have got more money last offseason, but then the Twins or not franchise tag, sorry, NFL, man, that's been crazy. But they gave him the qualifying offer, and that really hurt his market. So he decided just to take that, and that's obviously before we even knew what this coronavirus pandemic was going to be like. And then he comes back and has this injury shortened season, so it really hurt his value here. And it's a good deal for the Astros, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. They've already suffered a couple pitching injuries in this spring training already, and they're already missing Justin Verlander for this entire year due to Tommy John surgery. So to sign, you could say a middle of the rotation pitcher to a nice deal like this, it's not too bad. $10 to $12 million a year for a guy like Jake Odorizzi. That's a very team friendly deal as well. Some of it, he can go in there and eat some innings for them. So
Yeah, and like I say with Odorizzi, it's a guy who you're not too worried about the risk on this. With there being only a 2 year deal, it's not that big of a deal. And sometimes also with this deal, you see guys battle themselves, and a lot of times it pays off. You saw it with Marcell Ozuna and Josh Donaldson in the last couple of years. Those deals, 1 year deals, paid off big time. You've seen it on a few qualifying offers from players the last few years, taken that qualifying offer and run with it. But sometimes, these prove it things don't really work out. You look at Odorizzi, and he had a down year, and he had the COVID year, and now he's not going to get what he would have gotten last offseason, even with that qualifying offer attached. You look at Marcus Stroman. Last year was a guy who, coming into this year, he got that qualifying offer, and the Mets are going to keep him now. And is he going to be the Marcus Stroman we know that can be really good and get that contract, or is he going to be the guy who have a year kind of like Odorizzi had last year, where he just really isn't all there? So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Sometimes that betting on yourself, especially for pitchers, doesn't work out the best, but sometimes it does. So it's be very interesting to see how Odorizzi does in Houston, though, for sure.
yeah, it really is. So we'll go ahead and jump on to our next one. It was a smaller one of the deals. It was actually an extension. That's Hunter Dozier signed a 4-year, $25 million extension with a 5th-year option with the Kansas City Royals. I think that option you said is a $10 million deal.
I believe it was. So
Well, Hunter Dozier, I mean, the Royals are in the middle of that rebuild. He's coming up on the age of 30. He's been there for 4 seasons, so kind of locking a guy who's been around for, I think he was there right at the start of their, or he was starting right about that run they were doing in 2016, 2017-ish. Um, he's not a he's not a great major league player. He's a solid, his career is 253 average, 323 on base, a career 104 WRC plus. Terrible defender though. That's where he really lacks is defensively. Um, I don't think he's going to be the third baseman right now. I think they might have him be the DH. I know they let go of Maikel Franco, but overall, it's a solid deal for Dozier and for the Royals, locking a guy who's been there for a while with you, and then Dozier gets his financial security.
yeah, and I agree with you 100% on Hunter Dozier. He's a pretty decent big leaguer. I think I would probably prefer, if he was on my team, have him as a bench bat. But 2019 he hit 26 homers, 279, 348, 522. Put up 3 wins above replacement. I mean, he's had a good season in his career, and that was only in 139 games. So, you kind of throw out last year with it being the COVID year, even though he was okay last year. I mean, he had a 104 WRC plus, only played in 44 games. He's a guy who, you can probably throw him out there at third, and his defense isn't good, but it's not just completely atrocious. It's below average, but he might move to first, and you could probably see some success there. DH, obviously, with him being in the American League, I think it's a perfectly fine move for the Royals to extend him, and it's pretty low cost. It's only what $6 million a year for a guy who has the potential to probably put up pretty good major league regular numbers, 2 to 3 wins above replacement for the next 3 or 4 years. I think that's a perfectly fine deal for him. So
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to the big fish extension that we had. That was Fernando Tatis Jr. signed a 14-year, $340 million extension with the San Diego Padres. This one is a deal that is unprecedented to say the least.
yeah, oh boy, where to start with this one? Um, Fernando Tatis Jr. is a really good player at a young age. Now, there's a couple of things that make you believe this deal might be a little bit crazy. Um, to start off, he's played fewer than 150 games in his big league career. So that's number one. He's only played 143 games. So those games have been very, very good though, and he's got put up over 6.5 wins above replacement already. Uh, you know, 150 WRC plus. In 2020, he just got better. His strikeout rate dropped by 6%. His walk rate went up. He hit for lots of power, 17 home runs in 59 games, and this guy, he's at shortstop. I mean, he's a phenomenal talent, super exciting young player. 96 mile per hour average exit velocity last year is insane. He's one of the young stars of the game, and a potential. He's already a top 10 player in the league, and he's a potential number one player in the league as soon as Mike Trout, uh, relinquishes that role, because I think Mike Trout's got a stranglehold on it for a few more years at least. But um, he's he's a very, very, very good player, but 14 years, $340 million. That's a lot of money. And if you compare it to some of the deals, and I jotted down some of the similar types of deals that we've had over the past, 10, 15 years for young players. This is guys with less than 2 years of service time, which Tatis technically has 2 years of service time, I believe, almost. It's less than 2 years because he didn't get called up day one last year. But um, you look at these. Eloy Jimenez, he had no service time, got a 6-year, $43 million deal with 2 club options. So you're looking at probably about an 8-year, $65 million there. You look at Ronald Acuna Jr. after he had won Rookie of the Year going into his sophomore year, he got an 8-year, $100 million deal with 2 club options, which made it basically a 10-year, $120 million deal from the team's side. And that's probably the one I compare it to the most, because they had played a similar number of games, and to be honest, had similar numbers. I think Tatis maybe a tiny bit better on the offensive numbers, but both of them were superstar-looking players who have the potential to be the best player in the league. And I think that when obviously Tatis you're buying out 4 years extra free agency on that deal, but still, that's $240 million that your team is putting up. Ozzy Albies is another one after just 1 year of service time. Signed a 7-year, $35 million deal with 2 club options. That one you can almost throw out because everyone knew at the time it was a very undervalued deal for the player. Luis Robert, 6-year, $50 million deal with 2 club options. Andrelton Simmons, after a 1 year in the big league, signed a 7-year, $58 million deal. Ryan Braun, after 1 year, an 8-year, $45 million deal. That was back in like 2008, though, so that was a different market at the time. And then Evan White signed a 6-year, $24 million deal. This past, or it might have been, I don't remember, it was 2019 or before 2020. But that also has 3 club options that make it up to $55 million. So those are all deals that were signed at similar times to Tatis. We've never seen anything like Tatis's deal at this low amount of service time. So it'll be interesting that the Padres have made their have made their choice. They're gonna the Tatis, he's their guy for the next 14 years, whether he like it or not. And that's even for a guy like Tatis, that's very risky because I think he's got a chance to be the best player in baseball, but um, that's a long time. And for a guy who's only 20, 22 years old, there are a lot of different things that could there's a lot of different things that could change in those 14 years. So it'll be very interesting to see how this deal plays out, and I think you're going to see a lot of future deals and future extensions depend on how this deal looks here in 3 or 4 years from now.
Yeah, and as a Dodger fan, I absolutely hate this deal because it means I got to face Tatis for basically for the rest of his career. But as a baseball fan, I mean, this is an amazing deal. You get the young players, like we said, so unprecedented. Young players have never got paid like this before. And we're all for the players getting their money. Like, just give all the money to the players. Like, they deserve way more than they get compared to what the owners and the league makes. But what's fascinating is the amount of money that the Padres have spent on that infield. I mean, you just look at the left side of that infield, and you got Manny Machado, $300 million, and now Tatis, $340 million. So that's one expensive left side of the infield for sure.
Yeah, and one other thing about this too is that I'm sure with the way that most of these young players' deals are structured. I'm not exactly sure how Tatis's deal specifically is structured, but a lot of these young players have their deals very backloaded because they'd get an initial raise for a few years through their contract renewable years and then their arbitration years. But really, the big raise is where you're basically trying to value their free agency. You're trying to get value on that, and it's interesting to see the breakdown on this, uh, but even then, I mean, the Padres here in just a couple years are going to have Manny Machado making a ton of money and Tatis making a ton of money. It'll be interesting to see what they're able to do with their other young talent and if they're able to continue to supplement their two stars with really good players around them because they do have some good players around them right now. But I mean, is you Darvish or are they going to be able to bring back a guy like Dinelson Lamet? Are they going to be able to bring a guy back like Mike Clevenger, who obviously not playing this year, but he's obviously one of their big pieces in their future? Or Blake Snell. I mean, they're going to have they had a lot of players at the big league level that are going to be free agents in just a couple of years that, you worry a little bit about that. But, if Tatis ends up continuing on the trajectory he's on and being the player that he looks like he's going to be, I mean, you look at some of the extensions like what Mike Trout got with the $430 million or whatever it was, and if Tatis is on that kind of trajectory, I mean, you're probably are saving money with this deal. But it's a big one and it's risky, and you never know also how a 22-year-old's going to react to that much money. So we'll see what happens. It'll be
Yeah,
I'm excited to see. I'm very excited for the kid too. I mean, it's life
yeah,
changing money at 22 years old.
it really is. And I believe I saw this on this, but don't hold me to it. I believe he actually got some no trade protection in this as well. Um, I believe he got like a 10-team limited no trade clause that he can put on it for the first, I think it's like 6 seasons or something. It's basically through his until he'll get his 10-5 rights, which is a full no trade clause.
Right.
Um, so not only did they lock him up to this money, but they basically hamstring themselves to saying like, we're so committed to you that we're going to give you the opportunity where we can't even move off of you if we want to, and you're going to
Yeah.
have to prove it basically if we have to go to these teams. So it's a big deal for the Padres and it's a big deal for Tatis. I mean, like you said, it's going to be fascinating to see how this one ages out because it might open up a whole new market for the younger players in the game. Before waiting for that free agency money to come in.
Right.
But we spent pretty good decent amount of time on that. So let's go ahead and jump over to more of a sour note. And that's kind of going over injuries that had happened so far during this spring training. Um, we hit on it earlier with Jake Odorizzi, that the Astros have actually lost two starting pitchers already. One is Framber Valdez. He ended up getting a broken ring finger on his pitching hand. He could miss all of 2021. He opted not to have surgery, which would have taken him out for all of 2021. And I think he's just going to let it try and heal by itself. So we don't have a timeline on when he's expected back, if at all. And Forrest Whitley, who is their top pitching prospect, he has a UCL issue, and Tommy John surgery is recommended, but he's getting a second opinion.
Yeah, injuries are, it's unfortunate. Spring training, you have to build up your innings. You can't just go out there and, be ready to go from the beginning. But with when it comes to the spring training, unfortunately, you are going to see some of this every year. I think Framber Valdez got hit by a comebacker, is what happened.
Yeah.
It broke his ring finger, so kind of a freak injury. I would assume that he probably does expect to be back at some point this year since he opted out of the surgery. Because if they were really expecting it to be the full season, they probably would have just kept him. They probably would have just gone ahead and got the surgery, make sure it heals better. Forrest Whitley, very unfortunate Tommy John surgery. A young guy who had great stuff. Um, he's a guy who struggled a little bit the last couple years. They were hoping he would kind of break out soon, but that's just so unfortunate to hear about a young guy like that. Right on the cusp of the big leagues having a major, injury that's a career. Even though Tommy John at this point they've gotten so good at it that a lot of times people do heal back 100%. That could be a career changing type injury. So that's a really unfortunate. Um, but a couple more we got here. That Cole Calhoun, a meniscus tear of 4 to 6 weeks. I believe that was last week, so he will probably be back. He could be back right around the first week of the season, but it could be a couple weeks into the season for him.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see them slow play him a little bit. The Diamondbacks aren't a contending team, really. So I wouldn't be surprised for them to give him a couple extra weeks just to make sure he's right. Plus, we still got this long season, so I expect Cole Calhoun to probably be back, I would say, 2 or 3 weeks into the season. Another issue we had was Lorenzo Cain. We talked about them signing Jack Bradley Jr. He has a quad issue that's been holding him back. He might not be ready for opening day. As we get closer, obviously we'll get a little bit more clarity on that. But as it's looking right now, it doesn't look like they're going to have him for opening day. So maybe about a week or so after that, Lorenzo Cain will be back.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Lorenzo Cain, though, being a veteran player like he is, probably wouldn't take quite as long for him to get ready for the season, get his timing down and everything. So hopefully, he can get into some spring games in the last week or two. And but obviously, as you said earlier, the Brewers outfield all of a sudden with Jackie Bradley is fairly crowded, so they could probably afford to let him rest to make sure he's 100% before he gets thrown in there. A couple pitchers who, star pitchers that were injured and are, trying to get back healthy for the season. Mike Soroka, he pitched a simulated game the other day, looked pretty good, and they said he may get a start in the spring, which I don't think he will be ready for the opening day rotation, but they're thinking hopefully within the first month of the season he could be back. He had an Achilles tear early in the season last year. And then Dinelson Lamet from San Diego. Apparently, he pitched a pretty good simulated game. He only threw 20 to 25 pitches, so obviously, with the elbow injury, he's still a little ways away throwing that amount. But he was touching 98, threw several sliders, which I think was the pitch that was kind of bothering him, his elbow. Um, they said he looked really good, and they're hopeful that he could be back fairly early in the season. So that's a couple of good news on the injury front there. But some of these injuries hurt pretty bad. I mean, you look at Framber Valdez. That injury hurts the Astros big time because he looked really good last year. And then, I think the NL Central is going to come down to the wire this year. And I think the Brewers, and in fact, I haven't made my picks yet, but we'll do that in the next couple weeks. But I think the Brewers are a team that could very well win the NL Central, and losing a guy like Lorenzo Cain, if he's not ready for opening day, that first week of the season, it doesn't seem to matter every year. But at the end of the day, you look at the difference between winning the division and missing the playoffs altogether could be 3 or 4 games. And that first week of the season, you're playing 3 or 4 games. So you want everyone to be healthy and ready to go. And hopefully Lorenzo Cain will be that. So
Absolutely. Well, what we wanted to do is just kind of show you guys or let you guys know about some of the guys who's been good in spring training so far and who's been bad in spring training so far. And one guy, I know David has, our buddy in our group chat, has been asking me if we're going to talk about how good Jock Peterson has been for the Chicago Cubs because of me hating that he went over there from the Los Angeles Dodgers, and he's a Cubs fan. So David, here it is. Jock Peterson has been fantastic so far in spring training. Out of 14 at bats, he's had 6 hits, 3 home runs, a double, 7 RBIs, 3 walks, only 4 strikeouts. That comes up to a 429 batting average, a 529 on base, and an OPS of 1.672.
Yeah, he leads current qualified hitters in OPS so far in the spring. So, good start for Jock. It seems like he always has gone on, as you know better than anybody. He has gone on a lot of hot streaks where he looks crazy good and cold streaks where he doesn't look so good. But it's always good to see a guy like him have his timing down at the start of the season. Another guy that has been pretty good so far has been Gary Sanchez. He's a guy that I've been really, really hard on. The catcher for the Yankees. But so far, he's been pretty good in the spring. 364 average. He's hit 3 home runs, couple home runs on this first game. So he's a guy who seems to have come out ready to go here this spring. Uh, you know, very, very good start for him.
Yeah, another guy who's been really good is Joey Gallo. I'm trying to look up his stats. They went missing on me
Yeah,
for a second, but I know you got them.
yeah, I've got him. The important ones at least. He's hit 429 so far and 5 home runs. So that's pretty crazy. I think he's only had like 18 or so plate appearances. But the most important thing for Joey Gallo in that we've seen so far is his strikeout rate is only 20%. This is a guy who has run a 35% strikeout rate in the big leagues, which is very, very difficult to be able to sustain any kind of success with that kind of strikeout rate. And obviously, it's a very, very small sample size, and all this changes. All these stats so far, it's a good indication that some guys are ready to play, they're in shape and everything. But it's not a great, not always the best indication of how they're going to do during the season. But that's a good sign, at least for the Rangers, if Joey Gallo's cutting his strikeout rate, still hitting for power. So, um, very, very good deal for him. But also, we're going to look at some pitchers here, too. How about Madison Bumgarner?
Yeah, Madison Bumgarner is really good. He's pitched 2 innings and struck out all 6
Everybody.
batters that he's faced, pretty much.
Yeah.
I
I think he
believe I
gave up
saw
one hit, maybe, or and then he struck
maybe.
out this other 6. Like,
Yeah, I think it was 4 of the 6 or 5 of the 6 came on his slider, which is one of the pitches that he's been known for throughout his career, but that last year it seemed like a lot of people were laying off the slider and just punishing the fastball. So if he's got that slider, actually breaking back again, um, then he might have a bounce back year.
yeah, and sometimes early in the spring, teams or guys at the plate will just be keying on fastballs, trying to get their timing down. So that could be a little bit of that. You know, people swinging at his slider a lot, but we'll see. It's um, interesting to look at. Um, so another guy is Corbin Burns, who's been really good. He's pitched 3 innings, hadn't given up a run yet. 7 strikeouts. He's one of my candidates for. I'm probably not going to pick him for Cy Young, but I think he's going to be really good this year. He looked great last year, and I think he's just going to get better.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of Corbin Burns. He's come from my hometown, so always got to support them. So Corbin Burns, I'm all on the breakout train this year. I mean, he had a breakout last year, but I'm all on the train of him having a Cy Young contender season this year. So would not be surprised about that. Couple pitchers I wanted to mention. One is Shohei Ohtani. You can look at him from both ways. He had a massive home run, but the big thing is his velocity is back. I mean, he's been hitting 99. I think he's even hit 100 and 101 this spring training so far. But he looks to be back, actually able to pitch on the mound, and it sounds like they're going to go with the 6-man rotation and kind of one start a week for Ohtani. So that'll be good if they can do that. And the game needs him to be healthy on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, that's massive news because the Angels are one of my teams that I think are sleepers this year. I think they underperformed some last year compared to their talent, but they've got some. If they could ever muster up some pitching, they would be very, very, very good. And with their lineup, the stars that they have, it's hard to acquire the star power that they have offensively with Rendon and Trout. I mean, that's 2 top 10 players in the league. And then if you can get Otani out there pitching like an ace, which he's got ace stuff. That's fantastic news, and he's also a fun player for the game. With the way he's a two-way player, I think that's really cool. So
Absolutely. The last pitcher, yes, it's a little bit of homerism. Sue me, guys. Trevor Bauer's looked fantastic so far. I mean, last year's Cy Young, but he's come in 5 innings. He struck out 5 people. He's only walked one. And the big thing about him is that he's touched 98, and he's never had that velocity before. I mean, I think last year he said he topped out at 96. And he's never hit 98 in his career, and doing it this early in spring training, that could be a massive thing for him as well. But don't want to spend too much time on that. Um, but we'll go ahead and kind of move over to the people who have not been so good so far in spring training. Um, and one of those being Matt Carpenter from the St. Louis Cardinals. He is 0 for 13 with 7 strikeouts so far.
yeah, sometimes when you look at the spring, a lot of times it doesn't matter, but sometimes also you look at trends too, and when a guy is trending the way Matt Carpenter has trended the last 2 years, and you see him start off the spring 0 for 13 with 7 strikeouts, and that's really not a good sign. Obviously, it is the first week of the spring, and you expect him to be. He's obviously a better player than over 13, 7 strikeouts too. But some kind of career renaissance type thing. It's hard to. It puts a little bit of doubt in your mind on that one. Um, so, but I mean, you never know. Like I say, early in the spring, another guy who's really struggled, and of course, I don't think anybody should be very worried at all about this one. But Ronald Acuna Jr. is just 1 for 14. It was actually his very first at bat of the spring. He hit a double, and ever since then, he's been 0 for 13. Um, he struck out 5 times or something, and I'm not. I wouldn't be super worried about Ronald Acuna Jr. not playing well. I mean, it's early in the spring. He's just getting his timing, that kind of thing, and he's a guy who's obviously not trended in this direction. So um, I wouldn't be too worried about him if the season starts and if he doesn't pick it up for the rest of the spring, and then you get 2 or 3 weeks into the spring and into the season and he's still doing this, then you might start to worry a little bit. But I wouldn't be too worried about him. So there's a couple more guys you got, Damien.
Yeah, another one I got is Jorge Soler. In 18 at bats so far, he struck out 5 times. Um, Only a 167 average. In 2018 and 2019, Jorge Soler looked like he was on the edge of a breakout, especially in 2019 when he hit 48 homers. Both those years he had a 265 batting average, 354 on base, put up a 123 WRC plus and a 130 WRC plus those years. And then last year he dropped to a 228 and a 326 batting average and on base. Still had a 108 WRC plus, but it just wasn't what we were expecting from Jorge Soler. We thought he was on the edge of that breakout, and then through the shortened season he struggled, and then into spring training he's struggling a little bit. So is this the real Jorge Soler that we're actually seeing now, or can he turn this around and get back to that 2018 2019 form?
Yeah, for sure. And one other guy we had, and hopefully he turns it around because I think everyone's pulling for him after this off season he had. But Tommy Pham started off over 11, and we all hope that he's able to pull it together. But he's also a guy who maybe not to the same level as Acuna, but he's a guy who has not trended in this direction. And he was a good player last year, so we expect him to start to turn it around and chalk it up to just early season, early spring training numbers. So.
Yeah, and if you guys don't know the Tommy Pham story, we had heard about it, but we didn't know how bad it was. And I actually heard about it on Saturday while the Dodgers were playing the Padres during spring training. Tommy Pham ended up getting stabbed in the off season outside of a club, but the wound was a 12-inch by 5-inch gash that took over 200 stitches to to sew up. So I mean, him going 0 for 11, him being able to play baseball altogether right now is fantastic news, because they said if the blade would have went quarter inch in any other direction, he would not be here playing baseball right now. So very thankful to still have Tommy Pham out there and playing, and I hope he can turn it around, because especially after the eye issues that he had battled with before, and he finally looked to get that fresh start in San Diego, and then this happens, and I just feel terrible for him. So hopefully he can turn that around.
Yeah, for sure, and I expect him to. He's getting his timing back and stuff. And like I say, if really really good players that are established struggle early in the spring training, I don't worry too much about it. If players who really struggled last year or have trended in this direction for a while struggle, then you maybe worry a little bit. But looking at some pitchers who you can probably tell a little bit more about pitchers because if they come out and they are just completely out of it. Or their velocity is way down. Sometimes there's a trends that will continue, and one of them that I've actually watched a couple times because he was on. They had him on national TV a couple times so far, and he has not looked good. Is Garrett Richards, the new Red Sox pitcher? He played for the had a pretty good year for the Padres last year, but he is not looked good at all. He's walked 6 guys in 4 innings, a 13.5 ERA. But that ERA should be worse. I was watching the first game of the spring, and if y'all don't know, this year in the spring, there's a new rule where for the first, I think it's the first week, so I think it actually stops after like today or something. First week of games, they're allowed to cut innings short and just say, that way that the pitcher can work in the number of pitches that they want to while having a normal type amount of rest type thing so that that'll at least feel kind of like a normal first inning, second inning, third inning, so they can start building up their pitch count innings. And Richards had walked 4 guys in a row and they called the inning with no outs in one of his outings. So but he has not looked good at all in either one. And that's unfortunate for the Red Sox because they signed him and he was going to be counted on to be a part of that rotation this year. And hopefully he's able to pick it up a little bit because that's been a struggle. But definitely not a good sign to be that off already here in the spring.
Yeah, another guy that's really struggled so far is Carlos Martinez from the Cardinals. In 4 and 2/3 innings, he's given up 6 hits, 6 earned runs, 1 hit batter, 5 walks, and only 3 strikeouts. Um, he's a guy who has battled between being a starter and being a reliever, and they don't really know which way to go. And I think they kind of committed to him being more of a starter again this year. And so far, it's not looked too great for Carlos Martinez. So, if he wants to continue starting, he's going to have to really turn it around so far.
Yeah, and that's a trend that we've seen that out of Carlos Martinez before with the losing control. So who knows? Maybe he'll find it again. He seems to go through phases where he finds it looks really good, and then he'll lose his command. But definitely an interesting one there. Another guy who has really looked bad in the spring so far. Probably out of these guys, he'd be the most worrisome one is Craig Kimbrell. 2 innings, he's given up 5 earned runs. But the biggest thing for Kimbrell is that his velocity has dropped. He's topping out at 94, and with Craig Kimbrell at this stage in his career, with the command and control he has, he cannot be throwing 94. He'll just get clobbered. He has to be a guy who's throwing 98, 99, 100 with his current control because he's if he can't find the strike zone or even locate within the zone, um, he's gonna get walks and homers are gonna kill him. So he's gonna have to find it. And obviously early spring, he's only pitched in 2 games, 2 innings pitched, so he might end up building that velocity up. But very worrisome for a guy who's been really inconsistent the last 2 years, and he's gonna have to be better than that. So
Yeah, I expect him to build that up, but can you build up 3 miles per hour? That's going to be a
yeah,
interesting thing. I mean, he's battled the mechanical issues as well, the past couple years, so it's going to be interesting to see what Kimbrel can do because the Cubs are going to really need him to be the old Craig Kimbrel and
yeah.
not this version of him. Another Cardinals guy I wanted to hit on is Kwon Young Kim. In 3 innings so far, he's given up 10 hits, 7 earned runs, 3 walks, and only 4 strikeouts. They started him as a closer last year, came into the rotation, and his ERA looked good, but as you said, his peripherals were really bad, and then that seems to be carrying over into the spring training so far that he has not looked good at all.
Yeah, and with the Cardinals, they're not going to have Dakota Hudson this year. Most likely due to injury, so you lose. two other guys who are likely going to be starters for you to perform it. So they're going to need these guys to turn it around, or that team's not going to be good. Jack Flaherty's had a rough start too. I didn't mention him in this, but he's only pitched one inning, but it was not a good inning. He gave up 3 runs in his one inning, and then they're really their best. They're good. Their only real bright spot pitching so far in the spring has been Adam Wainwright, who's actually looked pretty good. But um, the Cardinals are going to have to figure something out. They can't have Jack Flaherty pitching like he did last year. They're going to have the second half of 2019 Jack Flaherty, and they're going to have Kim and Martinez both pitch better than this for them to be successful this year. And then, one other guy that I wanted to touch on, and it's sad for me to say it. It pains me because I really like this guy, and I think everyone does. But veteran pitcher, not the biggest deal in the world for the landscape of MLB this year, but we were hoping, everyone, I think, in the back of their mind was hoping he'd kind of make a comeback and have a career renaissance, and that's Felix Hernandez. And really, really, really rough to hear that he has not looked good. I don't know what his stats are this spring so far. I don't think he's pitched, but maybe 1 or 2 innings. But he was topping out at 84 to 85 miles per hour velocity, and this is a guy who you know last spring was throwing 89 to 91 still, so that's a pretty big velocity drop, and you worry about his ability to. He had pitched in the big leagues in 2 years, and you worry about his ability to pull that up. And even if he does, how effective will he be? So that's something that kind of stinks to hear that he's not really looking that great. But like I say, early spring, we've got 3 more weeks of spring training. Then we got the start of the season a week after that. All these things could change. You're talking about stuff like 2 innings, 3 innings, 5 innings, or 10 to 15 at bats. Every one of these players is going to have a stretch this year where they go 0 for 13 or 1 for 14 or 3 for 18. There's going to be every one of these guys is going to have an outing where they pitch 3 innings and give up 7 runs. I mean, it's just going to happen. So it just happens that it was the first spring training outing for some of them.
Yeah, it just happened to fall on in the date where we're getting ready to, have a podcast that we have to fill some airtime with. So sorry to these guys. I ended up pulling up Felix Hernandez's stats, as you were talking right there, and he's only pitched 2 innings so far this year. I think he's given up 2 runs, 2 strikeouts, 2 walks. So he's very much in the category of, as Vin Scully would say, deuces wild with all those twos. But like you said, everybody's going to be rooting for King Felix. He's not quite the King Felix that we all remember, but especially after last year, he got out of Seattle and then he went to Atlanta spring training and he was battling for that job and he looked really good. And I think he was going to get that fifth starter job pretty much. And then this whole COVID pandemic happened and the shutdown, and he decided to opt out. And then he ends up, having to sign with the Baltimore Orioles, and then this is the first version of Felix we're starting to see. So hopefully he can turn that up because, like you said, he's a fan favorite, and I don't think anybody's going to be rooting against Felix Hernandez at all.
Yeah, I'd love to see him be able to turn it around and have a good season, but I just don't see it right now. With if he'd come out and people were talking about how good he looked and how he looked like he did the spring last year and stuff,
Yeah.
then I would be pretty excited about it and I'd be hopeful. But I mean, I just don't know. So,
Well,
but we'll see.
like we were talking with Kimbrel, can Kimbrel gain 3 to 4 miles per hour? Felix needs to gain 6 or 7 to
Yeah.
be back to what he was. So, or at least what he was last year. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll keep you guys updated on these things as they're going on. This probably be at least a weekly segment for us right now. But I mean, I don't think we have anything else to hit on unless you got something else you wanna say.
Yeah, real quick, I was going to mention that there has been a lot of talk this spring about the ball being
Oh yeah,
changed. And I saw something earlier today where one of the pitchers, I forgot who it was. You might remember who it was, but they were talking about how they felt like their curveball. It might have been Blake Snell actually. They felt like their curveball was spinning a lot better because the seams just felt better on their fingers, and that they definitely didn't think the ball was carrying as far. So we look like we might be back to the type of ball that we had, pre 2017, which I think is a good thing. Honestly, I know everyone loves to see the home run ball, and I love to see the home run ball. But sometimes home runs become less special when it's every single guy gets up there and is hitting 30 home runs in a season. So I love the special moments and when the home run really is a big deal and stuff. And I think sometimes, and some of the way the game's played, we lose some of the excitement from balls in play, base running and stuff too. Not that I'm a fan of guys going up there and bunting and stuff, but just some of the stuff like you lose some value from guys like like D Gordon or something that were really entertaining to watch back 5, 6, 7 years ago. And then sometimes it takes that power that gap away. You get a guy like Giancarlo Stanton who's probably got some of the most raw power we've ever seen in the game, and his home run ability is about the same as a guy like DJ LeMahieu or something that he's doesn't have much raw power at all, but he's on a short porch and there's a juiced ball. So John Carlos hitting his home runs 480 feet, whereas LeMahieu's hitting his 350 feet, but they count the same. So I think it's a good thing, and I think it highlights the really special home run hitters more and the guys who can really hit the snot out of the ball. And I think it helps with some of the problems in the game of the pitcher's been real scared to throw strikes lately because of the home run ball and the ability to I think cut down on some of those walks, cut down on some of those strikeouts. It might help with that. Because pitchers might be a little less scared of the home run ball. I think this is a good change. I think it's been needed. I think some of the way that things were moving was getting a little too out of hand. Some games were turning into a home run derby, and if I wanted to watch a home run derby, I'd watch the home run derby. So I want to watch baseball and have
Yeah,
a little bit of everything. So
no, I mean, as you're talking about that, it brings up a good point because I've been watching a lot of the spring training games this year, and I can see a visible difference of sometimes I'm like, oh, that ball is crushed, like that ball is gone, and then it's not even to the warning track. And a little bit plays with wind and stuff, but there's a visible difference so far this year that you can see that some guys that you can see the hits that they make, and you're like, oh, that's going to carry so far, and it's still in the field of play. And I believe I was watching, I think it was the Cubs game today, and the Cubs broadcasters were talking about that exact same thing. That the players, they've talked to a lot of the batters around the clubhouse and stuff, that it seems like the art of hitting is going to come back a little bit more because they said every guy was coming up and they were just going for home runs because why would you go for anything else when it was so easy to hit them now? And they said that sometimes these people are struggling with their approach already in spring training, just the little bit of a difference with that ball that they can tell through batting practice or in these game situations that the ball's not carrying. So they're trying to make adjustments to not as much launch angle and more of the line drive back approach. So like you said, it's going to be a fascinating thing that if the game how quickly is the game going to turn back, or will it turn all the way back to how it was in 2016, 2017? And not so much of the strikeout or home run and more of the art of hitting all together, some putting hits together, putting an inning together with a single or a double and a single. Are we going to see a little bit more bunting maybe? I mean, like that was a very good point that you brought up about that ball because
yeah,
I noticed it so far in spring training, but I totally forgot to bring it up.
yeah, and to advance on your point, I think you look at stuff like some players are going to really benefit from this, as in the fact that they're probably not going to get better from the ball, but their style of hitting isn't hurt by it as much. Guys like Michael Brantley, he can hit for power, but he's a line drive doubles hitter that this is probably not going to affect him too much. A guy like Freddie Freeman, who a lot of line drives, a lot of doubles, I don't think it's going to affect him that much. Justin Turner, maybe another one, a lot of line drives, a lot of doubles. He's got a good approach at the plate, but you're going to have some guys like Joey Gallo who, his entire game is the home run ball. If he doesn't hit home runs, then he's just not going to do well. Or maybe like an Aaron Judge where he'll probably still do well, and Judge is another guy kind of like Stanton that has that power that sometimes you're just like, why are you hitting it 500 feet when you only have to hit it 400 feet? But I think that's very interesting, and I do think it's gonna have a change on the game, and back to I think the game changed a lot when we got this quote unquote juiced ball in 2017, and I think that the three true outcome hitting has hurt the game a lot, and I think you've seen a lot more guys sacrifice their ability to get hits on balls in play for the ability to hit the ball in the air with the same amount of power, where that same fly ball goes from being a fly ball out to a home run. I think you're going to see those home runs go back to fly ball outs more, and it's going to hurt players that have bought into that so much. So very interesting to look at. That's a trend that will be followed very closely early in the season. Probably the first thing that people will look at early in the season is going to be how is the home run ball looking? How many home runs are people hitting over across the league in general? I think it's gonna be interesting.
It really is, and it's going to be one that will be fascinating for us to watch, and bring to you guys about that. So that was a very good point that you brought up there, because it's been a noticeable difference so far in spring training, as far as I'm concerned, being able to watch so many games. So you got anything else you wanna hit on?
I think that's pretty much it. Next couple weeks, we're gonna have some, you know, uh, the most important thing is gonna be guys who are looking like they're gonna make teams, guys who are looking like they're not gonna make teams. I don't think we have any more notable free agents out there. I think Shane Green might be the most notable one. Um,
Him or Mike Franco?
Michael Franco, yeah, a couple guys who, Shane Green's not, he's a middle reliever. Michael Franco, a guy who, you know, kind of a middling bench bat type guy, maybe a starter, if he has a good year. So not too much of that left, but I think you're definitely going to see some news come out of guys potentially making the team, guys getting hot, guys figuring things out. A lot of stuff like relievers, which relievers have made changes, adjustments, that kind of thing. And then of course injury news, who's going to be ready for the season, that kind of thing. But I think starting with next week, we might be able to start making some predictions on the season. I'm excited for that. So it's the most wonderful time of the year here, opening day. So
Yeah, opening day is right around the corner. I'm
right around the
excited.
corner. So in fact, I think
Mhm.
it's what is it, April 8th? Is that opening
April
day?
1st,
April 1st? Okay.
April Fool's Day,
I
and
thought it was later than that. Maybe last year it was slated to be a little bit later.
yeah,
Um,
no, the reason I know is because they were talking about the Rockies. The Dodgers are facing the Rockies, and the Rockies got approval for 21,000 fans, and they were like on April 1st, and people are like, "You're going to show up to the ballpark, and they're going to say April Fools, you can't get in."
yes. So
So, um, yeah, but it right at the beginning of April, so we're a little under a month away from opening day. So, like you said, those position battles, they're gonna, we said spring training just started, but those battles are hot and heavy in competition already. So, gonna be fascinating to see that, and finally get some meaningful baseball games. The first couple weeks it's more about just getting a feel, but you're gonna see the starters play a little bit longer, a little bit longer into these games, get 3 at bats, maybe 4 at bats, play 9 innings, get their feet under them, because a lot of these games have been 6 to 7 inning games. They haven't even been a full nine, so it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be
yes, and
interesting for sure.
And on your point about the opening day crowds too, it sounds like most teams are going to have, if not all, are going to have some fans in the stands, and some teams are having up to 50%. So I saw the Orioles 50% today, which is like 25,000, which is probably better a crowd than the Orioles would have gotten regardless. So
Yeah.
with the state of their team, but interesting to see. Things are going to change on that front too, as like, cases are dropping and vaccines get out and all that kind of good stuff. And I wouldn't be shocked to see by the end of, by May, if some states have already lifted their COVID, all their COVID regulations. So, you might end up starting to see full stands. And I think the at least from what I've heard, the Braves currently plan on having the All Star games in Atlanta this year. They're planning on having a full crowd for the All Star game as of right now. So that would be in early July. So very interesting, very exciting. Can't wait for things to get back to normal. And this is, think we're getting there. It's good stuff. So I'm
We're
excited.
getting there. We're getting there soon. So, thank you guys for tuning into this episode, though. This has been the Bat Flip Podcast, and we will catch you guys next week.
Yep. Thanks very much.